Welcome to the Impact Summit Series Cloud and Infrastructure event. This is the third in a series of events powered by GSA's Technology Transformation Services, also known as TTS. We're very excited to have so many of you join us today. I'm your event host, Jessyka Castillo, Agency Partnerships Lead for Cloud.gov at TTS. While we cover some quick housekeeping notes, please introduce yourself, name, agency, and what brought you here today in the chat window. Those housekeeping notes before we get started. Everyone's automatically muted, so if you have questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll answer as many as we can in the Q&A sessions. We're recording today's session and we'll post it to the event page along with other resources you'll see shared here today. A link to the live captioning for this event will be provided in the chat. Please make sure you're abiding by the TTS Code of Conduct throughout our time together. For our media friends with inquiries, please email press@gsa.gov with your topic that you'd like to discuss and your deadline. As you can see, we have a packed agenda today. We hope today we'll continue conversations that were started in the kickoff event and bring some insight into how government agencies can harness technological advancements by moving to the cloud. Now I'll pass things over to Tejeda, the Cloud Infrastructure Lead for TTS and Director for Cloud.gov to kick off today's event.
Thank you, Jessyka, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited for today's event. Today we're going to be highlighting the Cloud and Infrastructure focus area at TTS, and the goal of this focus area is to share best practices of cloud and infrastructure across the federal government. We've broken the focus area into three themes that we're going to be discussing today: workforce development, acquisition, and security compliance. And here at TTS, our perspective is shaped by our partners, but also a couple of really interesting programs. So FedRAMP, for example, is housed within TTS. Cloud.gov is housed within TTS. And the Centers of Excellence has a focus area primarily on cloud adoption and infrastructure. So these are just some of the resources that we have available within TTS. But today, we're going to hear from agency leaders from across the federal government about their experiences optimizing their cloud and infrastructure environments, which I think you all should find interesting. But I'm going to hand things over to GSA CIO, Dave Shive, to kick off the event. For those who may not know, Dave Shive oversees GSA's IT and is also the vice chair of the CIO Council. His perspective across the federal government, I think, will provide a great framing for today's conversation. Dave, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, thanks, Eddie. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to kick off the TTS Impact Summit on cloud. I was thinking about what I might say here. First, it was very impressive to see that I was giving the keynote. If I talk for more than 5 minutes, then I've dug into the really important part of the conversation. So we'll keep this short and sweet. I was thinking about what I might say to a bunch of people who work very heavily in the cloud already. And I think the key thing is, here in GSA, we've started moving to the cloud 5 or 6 years ago. At last count, 73% of our workloads were off-prem. And we're very proud of that. We went from 0 to 73% in about a 6-year period. And I was thinking about what some of the key enablers, and you all are going to talk all day long about what some of those key enablers were. But right up at the very top was the notion that we get together with people who've either done this before or who are currently doing this, and we check each other's math, and we ask questions, and we learn from one another. And that's been a hallmark of the GSA journey and moving to the cloud. And frankly, it's one of the key components of this cloud summit, getting people together who are somewhere on a journey, but a similar journey, so we can share ideas and share problem areas and share solutions to those problem areas and challenges and how you got around those challenges. That really is one of the key enablers to successful transformation out to the cloud. So I'm super excited to listen in today on some of what y'all are talking about, see what y'all are talking about. But most importantly, I'm excited that you are just getting together to talk about this stuff, since that is such a key component to a successful transition. You know, so to build a solid foundation for the next generation of digital services, you know, agencies need to learn from the best, and that's oftentimes each of you, and develop proven strategies that will continue to enable successful cloud adoption across the federal government. I'm excited for the event today. You'll learn about a lot of the key components of cloud adoption and delivery, such as how to deliver successfully in a cloud environment, acquisition strategies, how to train, you know, not only users to use cloud tools, because there can be some differences there, but how to train your technicians to work effectively in that environment and deliver that environment. And then they'll also talk about security and compliance approaches from across government that have worked. And that's one of the keys here. This is not a TTS-centric view on how to do things. This is by the people, for the people. So you'll be hearing the voices of technicians and delivery agents across government on what worked for them and how it worked. So, so why am I kicking this thing off? Well, I have a somewhat unique perspective on TTS. Like many of you who are listening in, I run an IT shop, or I work in an IT shop, and we consume services from TTS. You know, we buy stuff from TTS across their business portfolio, just like any agency does. So I have a shared and similar view that you do. I also was, a lot of people don't know this, I was the second commissioner of TTS, so I actually ran TTS. And it was a great honor to be able to run that organization. And then the third is I work for the Federal CIO Council's the vice chair. And so I interact with CIOs from across government, and I get to hear about their interactions with TTS. So I get to see the thing from multiple locations. And so I thought that I'd bring some of that to bear in my very, very quick comments here. It was a great honor to run TTS. I learned the value of the organization. For every engagement that TTS has across their business portfolio, including, you know, 18F, where they have a bunch of digital consultants and strategists who work on the tough challenges of cloud and others, like acquisition and training and personnel management and technology. PIFs, where they get some of the best and brightest to walk away from their startups or their, you know, $500,000 a year jobs at, you know, Google, places like that, to come be domain experts and help government solve some of its problems. The centers of excellence, who have teams of people who have done this before in government, who are here to help agencies do some of this in government. And then our solutions portfolio that does this for a living. You know, Eddie mentioned Cloud.gov, but we do Login.gov and Data.gov and USA.gov, all these large federalized enterprise tools and solutions designed to work in the cloud, but work effectively for our partners. That's the TTS model. But, you know, what's kind of underlying in the TTS model is we can come alongside our partners and do work with you. And the express goal is, of course, completing a thing, doing a thing. But more importantly, is we are able to pass on the knowledge we've been able to develop over the last 5 or 6 years, so that we can step away at the end of engagements and you all can continue to do effectively, because we've worked shoulder to shoulder with you for a long time. It's a great model. It works very, very well. And we're excited to be able to continue to do some of this. So I'll give you some examples, and you'll hear about some of these as we dig through the agenda for today, but some examples of why it's important to hear from our partners rather than just us. You'll hear from FEC.gov, who's running on Cloud.gov and moving all of its data to the cloud. FEC saved 85% of their hosting costs. And not only that, when they have peak traffic events, like during an election period, they have a extensible, expandable cloud infrastructure that can accommodate that. So they can build and architect for the solution rather than waste money for building and architecting for the peak. Likewise, our partners at USDA are using 36 FedRAMP authorized cloud services, 36 of them. and partners with cloud service providers to achieve FedRAMP authorizations. And that helps serve the greater community. So if USDA is using these tools, they've been pre-vetted by FedRAMP and they have authorization, it makes their compliance activities shortened, which is really great. But when they add to that portfolio, other agencies are able to consume that. So it's a bilateral benefit to not only the consuming agency, but all agencies who use that in the future. And I'll finish up on Cloud.gov, since it's one of the things that we do here at GSA. I've watched this thing grow up from the very beginning. When Cloud.gov first started, its primary goal was to create an on-ramp for agencies who were not currently in the cloud to find a safe way to do so. It was a codified platform that was authorized already, had compliance built in from the very foundation, had security built in from the very foundation. And it was like buying a stamp of approval on a system that could scale as agencies needed. It created a safe place for them to learn how to effectively operate in the cloud, utilize the cloud, architect in the cloud, engineer in the cloud, and deliver workloads in the cloud. And what we found is that it was such a great on-ramp that on the far side of engagements with Cloud.gov, agencies were better able to interact with cloud service providers and then go on and buy their own cloud themselves if they so chose. Over time, Cloud.gov has grown and morphed into that same thing, where it is still an on-ramp for agencies or sub-agencies that are struggling to get to cloud, for them to develop that acumen and develop that muscle over time by doing, not just buying. But we've also found that it has great value as a proving ground to try new technologies in a federalized space, to do things like I mentioned before, drive compliance in at the build part rather than doing it after the fact. It's been a great way for us to ideate and to iterate on better cloud interactions. You know, GSA takes first mover risk on behalf of our federal partners all the time. We're able to use Cloud.gov as that agent for being able to try new things. And then we can express the value of that either through expanding Cloud.gov or through other engagements through the Technology Transformation Service or through a federal acquisition service to say, here's how you would buy cloud smarter in the future, because we tried this out on ourselves. You'll be able to talk about that and a great number of the TTS services throughout the afternoon, but most importantly, you'll be able to talk with agencies that are doing cloud and doing cloud very well right now. And again, that's the greatest value, not only for these summits, but for the federal enterprise as a whole. Get together, talk about what works, talk about what doesn't work, talk about the challenges, ideate around solving those challenges, and everybody walks out of the room that much smarter. So I'm super excited to see the conversation, that the conversation is even happening. I'm thankful to Eddie and the rest of the TTS teams for setting up for today, and I'm hoping that you have a great time today. Thanks for having me, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David, for highlighting some of the work we've done with our partners, where you'll hear from shortly. We'd also like to hear from you, the audience. What are the biggest challenges you're currently facing within the areas of cloud and infrastructure? So we're going to launch a Zoom poll. Enterprise cloud adoption, cloud security and compliance, cloud acquisitions, workforce development. If you aren't able to see the poll, please type your responses in the chat box. It looks like we're at cloud security and compliance with 31%, cloud, enterprise cloud adoption right behind, workforce development right behind also, and cloud acquisition on the lower end. So cloud security and compliance. Now we'll hear from Akanksha Sharma, Senior Advisor at the Office of Personnel Management. Akanksha has spent her career assisting public sector organizations to solve complex IT challenges. After nearly 5-year stint at the General Services Administration in a variety of technology roles, she is now a senior advisor to the CIO at the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, helping the agency navigate its IT modernization objectives. Akanksha is going to share how OPM partnered with the Cloud and Infrastructure Center of Excellence to develop a modern automated data analysis platform to provide agency leadership up-to-date information necessary to manage the safety and security of federal employees during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now over to Akanksha.
Hi everyone, I'm thrilled to be here. So I'm Akanksha Sharma. I'm the Senior Advisor to the CIO at OPM. As Jessica just mentioned, I just celebrated my 5-year anniversary in the federal government, which is a really exciting milestone for me. I've spent most of that career at GSA, which was great actually working for David Shive, because it gave me the chance to focus on rolling out applications in an organization where the cloud capability was relatively established. And so we were using the cloud on platforms like Salesforce, that's a lot of where my experience is, to solve specific business problems or to drive specific outcomes around key initiatives, whether that's customer relationship management, setting up call centers, setting up, hiring applications, replatforming stuff that's maybe not working as well on legacy technology. And then I had the opportunity recently to bring those best practices and lessons learned to OPM, which is very different. Cloud isn't as established at OPM, and it's still relatively early in its maturity curve. And so I'm excited to be at OPM and help the organization through its initial learning curve of establishing the right people, the process, the technology, everything it takes to really roll out tools on cloud infrastructure. So I'm gonna go a little bit into, some of the challenges that I've encountered while implementing cloud technologies in the federal government. So I think one of the biggest things I've noticed is investing in the cloud without really having a comprehensive delivery strategy that takes into account all of the stakeholders that are necessary to make it successful. And I actually think a lot of the success of cloud is through stakeholders outside of IT. So these are, your procurement people, your legal people who are, the lawyers who are reading the license agreements and understanding what we're signing up for with the vendors, what access do we have to our own data. This is speaking to the privacy and the cyber groups that are meant to be there to guide us. A lot of the times in organizations that are newer to this journey, those capabilities and knowledge bases may not exist. So not understanding where those gaps may be and coming up with that comprehensive strategy is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that organizations can make. I kind of, the example I often use at OPM is describing it as a power wheel. So you have your product owners and your managers at the really center of that wheel, and they're the ones that are hopefully driving things forward. But then around them, to make them successful, you have all of these other entities, legal, cyber, privacy, records management, HR, that all need to be moving in tandem, kind of making this power wheel that's going down a track. And any sort of break at any point in time can just cause a lot of misalignments that can either force you to slow down because you may have a security vulnerability that gets revealed, or it may actually force you to take a few steps backwards. So really focusing early on what that power wheel is and how many power wheels do you need, how many tracks do you need to go on in parallel to deliver something successfully, I think is really critical to any kind of successful cloud adoption or cloud strategy. I also think that it gives you the opportunity to build relationships early, which I think is also really critical, and kind of create that buy-in and trust with all of these stakeholders so there isn't miscommunication later on when you're really trying to get something important done or deliver some important product that can cause you to lose momentum or lose buy-in and result in the project not succeeding. So at OPM, that's meant a lot of coaching, creating templates, best practices, meeting with people one-on-one regularly, understanding their concerns, demystifying the concepts behind cloud, speaking in plain term language. All of those things are really, really key early on, and kind of doing them consistently through your cloud adoption journey. I'm going to actually evolve now into the use case that we worked on with the Center of Excellence at GSA. So I joined OPM, but actually my first day, my onboarding was probably the quickest federal onboarding. It was done in less than 15 minutes because I showed up at OPM and they were like, okay, great, go back home. We're in the middle of a pandemic and we're going to majority telework. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. I guess I'm going to figure out how to get access to everything on my own at home. So that was a really interesting experience. But coming on board during that time, there were just a lot of needs within the agency. And one of them was our facilities management team was manually scraping data off of the internet, off of state websites, federal websites about, COVID cases, and trying to make a determination, trying to do trend analysis to see when it would be safe to start reopening certain OPM facilities. And they had done a great job. They had created an Excel spreadsheet. The only problem is that it took them about 2 to 3 hours every day to keep that up to date. And of course, there was never truly, an up-to-date version of that spreadsheet because someone had to go in and do a bunch of manual work, copy paste data from the web, from other spreadsheets to make that particular dashboard run. So they came to us and they said, hey, we have so many things going on right now. Can you please help us? And I really jumped on that with the help of the COE team because I just thought it was such a great tangible use case to drive business value. So within, 3 weeks, we were able to create a dashboard for them. We used a custom developed Python application. It was all open source. It was easy to use. We were able to work with them to understand where they were getting their data from. We were able to display it using some JavaScript and HTML libraries, and they loved it. And so the question then became, how can we easily make this accessible to you? And I just thought that this was a great opportunity for us to use cloud because this is the very use case that I think, cloud technologies really excel at, is being able to shorten that time to market. And we were able to actually use the dashboard as a way to go out and procure sort of our first, cloud instance that I would say we want to develop into our enterprise instance and start configuring it to our enterprise settings. So I think, general lesson learned in all of this is be ready, understand your power wheel, and when the opportunity comes up, take it, so that you're able to drive value successfully. Using this pandemic also gave us the chance to then go back to our security team and streamline our ATO process and create a playbook that we're hoping we can use in the future as we try to put other applications onto the cloud platform. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I think there's a little bit of time for Q&A.
Thanks so much for sharing the story of how OPM was able to make emergency response decisions by building out a cloud-based data analytics platform. Now we're going to take questions, so please ask your questions in the chat box. Okay, first question. Can you describe your experience with cloud adoption efforts in the federal government?
So I think I sort of covered that a little bit. So I was at GSA for a few years. I spent some time within the Salesforce program there, helping to implement platform as a service capabilities, and then moved on to the chief enterprise architect role, where I was helping oversee our entire technology stack and manage towards our strategic goals. And now at OPM, it's actually setting up the cloud practice, if you will, from scratch.
Thank you. What are some challenges that you found were when attempting to implement emerging technologies in the federal government?
So I do think that the key one is understanding your delivery strategy, creating your power wheels early on, and really having a clear sense of the vision and the direction you want to drive towards.
Okay, I think I have. What needs to happen next to scale the cloud instance you described OPM wide?
I think the next major step for us is to create a procurement strategy that allows us to actually scale the cloud. Since we needed something quickly, what we did was, for very limited amount of, I think we did it on a purchase card. So you really can't put too many high performing applications on there. Luckily, the dashboard doesn't need a lot, so that was a good first instance to go up. So I would say next step is actually coming up with an enterprise procurement strategy, and then doing a little bit more work with our cyber and privacy team, because right now this instance is only cleared for publicly available information, so it's for low types of data. But to actually get to that higher space, we'll need to start getting cleared for medium, FISMA medium data as well. So I would say those are the two immediate next steps.
Procurement and government can be challenging, I feel like.
Yeah.
What are the kinds of roles you would say are key for the stakeholder buy-in? Value, plain speak, you spoke of.
Yeah, so I think when speaking to a lot of what I've learned here is that when you feel like you're getting resistance from your organization, take a step back and consider, is it really resistance, or is it that people don't understand the core concepts behind what you're trying to implement? And a lot of what I found is that what I initially perceived as resistance was just me saying something that the other person did not understand. And they didn't want to say, hey, I really don't know what you're saying. And so we spent a lot of time in this back and forth of emails and meetings, when it was just they needed to see the concept demystified to really understand, okay, what is cloud? What do we give up with cloud? What do we gain with cloud? Where do we have risk? So wherever you can, like, people are visual learners, wherever you can visually demystify concepts, show things clearly, and be consistent. I think it's really, really important to be consistent anytime you're going through major change. That will help your stakeholders feel more comfortable and more open to change.
Great advice. Okay, why did you do custom development? Was there nothing off shelf you could have used?
So the key part of the value proposition here was that they needed something that could scrape the internet of like some of these key data points and consolidate it. And so we couldn't really use a platform as a service or software as a service kind of product and to have it go through our internal approval cycle at that point. It could have potentially taken months because, as I said before, like those power wheels weren't set up where you could just easily, get technology and deploy it. So we decided to, the COE recommended to experiment with Python because it's a programming language that's really good at this kind of stuff, like scripting, scraping data. And initially we thought, oh, we're just going to experiment, see if this works. And it actually ended up turning out to be exactly what we needed within a very like a 2 to 3 week timeline, which would have far exceeded anything we could have gone out and bought. So that was the key decision around that.
Very helpful. Okay, last question. What are some of those strategies that were used for migration? Sorry, can't see the last part. Of legacy apps. I can read it one more time. What are some of those strategies that were used for migration of legacy apps?
So I think, we haven't done full-scale migrations yet at OPM because we're still pretty early in our cloud journey. But I'll speak to my time at GSA. I think really spend some time understanding your environment. And I mean specifically your IT, your applications, because there's a lot of misconceptions around, well, if you go to the cloud, you're automatically going to save money. Your performance is going to be better. Well, that all depends on how the systems and the applications are built. So do spend a little bit of time understanding the actual technical ecosystem, and then being, picky about what you move to the cloud, because you want to make sure that your first couple of use cases are successful to continue to build the buy-in and momentum you need to continue modernizing.
Thank you so much. I actually, being on the cloud team, can relate to a lot of your examples. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. Thanks everyone for your questions. Now I'm going to pass it to Laura Gerhardt, 18F Engineering Supervisor, to moderate our discussion with several partners highlighting how they've implemented best practices and strategies to enable cloud and infrastructure success. Laura?
Thanks, Jessica. So today I have the pleasure of announcing our panelists. Today we have Government Accountability Office's Taka Ariga, the first Chief Data Officer and Director of the GAO's Innovation Lab, Venice Goodwine, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and Jerry Kuhn, who is the Senior Technical Advisor at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Office of Innovation and Technology within the Infrastructure User Services Group. So please, panelists, go ahead and join me if you haven't, and great to see you all. And so to kick us all off, I'd love to just hear a bit about the focus of your overall work and how cloud technology and infrastructure modernization is helping your team's mission, and also how TTS is supporting you in service of those goals. Jerry, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I do work for the Infrastructure and User Services Group, right? So infrastructure being a huge part of what we do. We provide hosting services for our CMS customers. So infrastructure modernization is constantly a mission for us. And we do have quite a large cloud presence right now. We've started our cloud journey end of 2012, beginning 2013. So we went through several phases up till now. As far as like modernization, I don't see it only as a technical thing to modernize, but yet a process modernization at the same time. Because you can increase technology, but you still have to increase your processes around that technology to better your services. So we've incorporated site reliability engineering heavily into our efforts. The one thing I wanted to talk about though, that we've received tons of help from TTS with is from the Presidential Innovation Fellowship. So the PIF that represents us, Ariel Faber, has been a completely invaluable asset to us in establishing and embedding human-centered design across our cloud program. Because we can keep increasing technology and build things wonderfully and actually make sure that everything we build does meet the purpose it's intended for, but it needs to be desirable. If it's not desirable, then it's probably not going to be used. And no matter how well we built it, it really doesn't matter. So, embedding HCD across our programs, like, do we understand who our customers are? What's most valuable to them? And how do we best meet their needs so that everything we build is something that they would want to choose to use? And there's all kinds of benefits from that, right? Less things that our development teams or our customers, the rest of CMS, have to do on their own. Like if we build CI/CD pipeline and we build it in a way that all of our customers desire it and want to consume it, then they will. And that's just, completely beneficial. Cost savings, security, because everything that we built would have been tested, secured. So they would just inherit those controls. So those kinds of things. But also the customers, part of understanding the customers, there's a used customer base. There's internal and external, like we can be customers of ourselves. So like, do we think of it that way? Are we putting ourselves in the position of a customer, having empathy for the customer? Are we building things that we desire? And so that we can use the tools that we build to better satisfy our customers. That is like the biggest, I would say, improvement that we made across our cloud program.
Thanks, Jerry. Is this for folks, my audio a little better? If so, Venus, passing it to you.
Hi, well, good afternoon. Thank you, Laura. Yes, your audio is better. So it's nice to be here and talk about Department of Agriculture and really our partnership with TTS. As you know, and maybe you don't, the Department of Agriculture has a pretty large mission, and and within that realm, being the leaders for, food and agriculture and natural resources and nutrition, and then of course all the policies that go along with that. And so if you add to that, then the metrics around, we have more than 100,000 employees, having 4,500 locations, both in the United States and overseas. So when you think about that, what comes to mind is that's a lot of data, probably, right? And so as a CISO, my job is to secure that data. And so what the cloud has done for us is the OCIO we've really embarked upon this modernization effort. We closed went from 39 data centers to 2. You can only do that if you have a strong cloud presence and a strategy. And then also when you talk about, Department of Agriculture and what we've done with modernization is really, how did we make the decision to move to the cloud? Well, I will tell you, it started with a cloud strategy. if you are going to embark upon going to the cloud, please sit down and pen and ink a strategy. Get that buy-in, first of all, from the stakeholders. We just had our last speaker talk about stakeholder involvement. That's important. And when I mean stakeholders, and buy-in, I mean really, you may have to even educate them, especially the non-IT people, about the cloud. I like to laugh because there's a book, it says Explain the Cloud to Me Like I'm 10, really a good book, but really you have to go to that level because everyone doesn't understand. And you want them to understand also the risk and the responsibility that the cloud, there is a shared responsibility when you move to the cloud. Department of Agriculture, we have our own FedRAMP authorized on-prem cloud since 2013, and we provide services to 9 different external agencies. And in doing that, it's important that we understand that shared responsibility and never forget that the data is always the customers, regardless of which, whatever the cloud service model. And so that's important, that you can't just throw it in the cloud and forget it. Besides having a strategy, I think doing an apps rationalization was important for us as well. What should go to the cloud? What should not go to the cloud? What should be retired? And so when you look at, your applications as well, that was key for us when we wrote our strategy. And then, of course, putting a governance model around the cloud and your cloud activities as well. How would decisions be made? What about investments? And so those are just some of the things we've done at Department of Agriculture, and I'm sure we're going to talk about more throughout our panel today. But just to get started, having a strong strategy, having that buy-in, and make sure everyone understands the terminology, the lexicon around what it means to be in the cloud, and then definitely making sure that you have governance around that.
And Taka.
Thanks, Laura, and hi, everyone. My name is Taka Ariga. I am GAO's Chief Data Scientist. I also have the distinct pleasure of leading one of our newest organizations called the Innovation Lab. And the Innovation Lab is really a concept for GAO to really experiment and adopt emerging technology, not only for our own use to drive mission delivery, but also to figure out how might we audit these emerging capability down the road. So really is a sort of an incubation organization. And earlier on, we realized we do need a sort of a flexible computational environment to sort of backstop the notion of fail fast and iterate fast. So because if you don't even have that environment, you're not even allowed to fail. You're not even allowed to iterate. So the acquisition was a sort of first starting point for us in terms of just procuring the cloud services. But then really where the rubber meets the road is how do we deploy it and how do we actually get to that authority to operate state, where I feel like a lot of folks tend to sort of gloss over that timeline as well. It's not just you buy it, it's not just that you deploy it, you actually have to go through the authorization process, and the FedRAMP is just a component of that equation. So for us as a startup organization, we realized that we do need to move quickly. We don't have the luxury of waiting the typical timeline of 9 to 12 months to get that ATO before we get the first sort of a prototype out the door. Because given the funding, given the commitment from the leadership, there's a lot of eyes, at least on the legislative side, looking at the successes of the Innovation Lab as sort of perhaps an example of an innovation model that could be carried forward. So working with TTS was a sort of an instrumental component of our strategy. We started the whole deployment process, I think, back in February of 2020, just before the pandemic hit in full force. And with their help, and really, I can't thank Sid and his team enough, we were able to get to a ATO FISMA moderate posture certification in 6 months. Which under the normal circumstances, when suns are shining and stars are aligning, that's already an accelerated cadence. But for us to do so from a GAO perspective with a very skeletal crew, but with a very ingenious set of team from TTS to sort of, walk that journey along with us all the way has been a tremendous sort of hallmark of collaboration. So we're forever thankful for, Sid and his leadership. So because now we have ATO, right? And we're now able to sort of analyze mission data. So for those of you who may have come across GAO's audit report, GAO has a pan-governmental mandate to look across any and all agency program. And especially now that we're in COVID posture, you can imagine the workload on top of that is significant. So we quickly realized that sort of a traditional approach to our audit may not always necessarily be the most effective. So we do need a sort of an incubation environment to really quickly think through how might AI apply in certain scenario, how might RPA apply in certain scenario, how might 5G, blockchain, et cetera. And sort of backstopping that is really the flexibility that a cloud processing environment offers. So I think to Venice and others have articulated, along the way, it's not just about the technology. As a matter of fact, I think the technology is the easy part. Most cloud vendors go out of their way to make the technology easy to use. You have your management console, you can spin up, spin down your services just fine. The difficulty is how do you get your acquisition folks familiar enough to say, when we talk about firm fixed price in a cloud, that means a very different conversation versus, let's say, if you were by discrete number of server. And then talking with our operational folks, when we're talking about software as a service, what does that really mean? Are we talking about an on-prem deployment of the app that we're offering as a service to our stakeholders? Or are we talking about accessing yet another cloud hosted solution so that you're doing multiple hops across clouds to get to the end users? For GAO, that delineation was very important because we are essentially safeguarding not our own data, but our auditees' data. So we had to draw a very clear boundary around, when we talk about SaaS, we're not talking about bouncing to another commercial provider. Everything that we do has to be hosted within our sort of a secure environment. And that was the starting point that we have to operate within. So there were a lot of process-driven conversation. And this is sort of in light of GAO itself. While we stood up the cloud environment for the Innovation Lab, we're also, as an agency, thinking about cloud migration as well. So it actually served quite well to have a not only incubation platform for us to experiment on new capability, but to also as a proving ground for some of the modernization activities that we do need to anticipate. So it's been it just feels like it's been forever ago pre-pandemic, but really it only has been 6 or 7 months since we started process. And now we're fully ATO FISMA moderate. And again, with TTS's help, we're actually setting up what we call a rolling ATO framework. So as additional apps are migrated, additional tools are deployed, we don't have to, in sequence, perform another 6 month or 7 month of ATO, but that could be done more in a week time frame as opposed to month time frame. So it's been a journey so far.
Well, that's exciting. And so to follow up with that, this question is for Venus and Jerry. You all have had, several years of going through your cloud journey, and would love to hear what would be some lessons learned that you would share with some of our federal partners that are just starting to explore and just starting their cloud and or infrastructure modernization journey.
Okay, Jerry's looking at me, I'm looking at Jerry. So, some of the things I've mentioned before, having a cluster strategy and governance, all that. But one of the things we also did at Department of Agriculture is we established a cloud broker office. And that's where the requirements actually come when you have a problem and you think cloud is the way to solve that problem. We have a CBO that actually looks and helps you formulate the solution to your requirement. Because you know how it often users just say, I want to go to the cloud. And we go, well, hold on. And we kind of really slow them down and have them document their requirements so that we can find the best solution for them. And that's why we have a multi-vendor cloud environment where our landing zones are different. And that was part of our strategy, was that you could land in our own cloud that we have that's FedRAMP authorized, or AWS, IBM, the other clouds as well, IaaS, PaaS, or whatever you needed. But it starts with the CBO. So having that real office in the CBO, you have to have the right skill set. Right, you have the security people there that'll talk about the security requirements for the data that you want to stored in the cloud or used in the cloud. And then you also have to have really that cross-functional IPT members in the CBO so that you kind of look at the problem holistically, because some of the things you're here, acquisition, what about procurement, pricing, all of that, all of those entities need to be part, of the solution. So having to do that, because, not only are we large and dispersed, our mission sets are different. We have 9 different mission areas, from having a bank and having a research, entity. And then our customer set's different, right? Farmers, ranchers, producers, and then the citizen public. That data needs to be readily available. And so the cloud is definitely a good option to do that, but it needs to be readily available and secure. And so in doing that, the CBO was definitely a huge win for us. And it allowed us really that flexibility too, because for the needs of our business users, because of course, IT is just an enabler to the mission, right? And so at the end of the day, when I can have a conversation with a stakeholder and they walk away knowing that I've met their needs have been met and they're comfortable about the decision that they've made, that's important. So that I think the CBO would probably be something else in addition to the other things that I think we should have in place when you embark upon the transformation of going to the cloud.
Jerry.
So I think there's a lot of commonality in a lot of our experiences. I'll kind of go back to understanding your customer, right? And that encompasses everything, and all the way down to the foundation of beginning that journey, which is your acquisition plan, right? How do you plan on setting up your contract to actually go down that road? So what are the statuses of your applications? Are they cloud ready? Who are your customers? CMS is built up of many different offices with their own budgets and things like that. So it's quite complex, and you need to understand each one of them. And the way you set up your contract completely influences behavior. Behavior from yourself, behavior from your customers, behavior from your contractors. So it plays a huge role in that. Think human-centered design being incorporated into your project would be a big asset. Productizing your services in your contracts, making it so that you can go through MVPs and build quick, fail quick. And user experience, have that built in, have design expertise, so that those human-centered design factors kind of work in concert with the technical work streams that you have built into that contract as well. And there's 3 principles that that are really, really important for a contract's life. Cost efficiency, everybody thinks of that, no brainer, right? How do you get the best value for the dollars that are spent? But the other 2 that are incredibly important is flexibility and relevancy. So, how does your contract remain flexible over time, and how does it remain relevant, right? Your customers' needs today, as you go and talk to them, could be quite different 3 years from now. Things change, businesses change. Can your contract adapt with those changes? So I think your acquisition plan and the way you structure that is a huge part on how you can deliver your services to your customers.
And so, Taka, it'd be great to hear a bit more about how you all came to create the GAO Innovation Lab, and how does that support some of your efforts to modernize auditing within GAO?
Yeah, happy to. It's really a realization that science and technology issue pervades every single sort of audit that GAO undertake. So part of that is recognizing, data is proliferating because of the various modernization effort, digitization efforts. So in what we call the 4th industrial revolution, right? How do we actually audit results of, for example, AI or RPA or 5G? Sort of at the traditional sort of method approaching to these technology you can say is insufficient. But that doesn't mean we can sort of turn on the light and say, well, now we know how to audit these capabilities. So the idea really is to have an innovation lab to really explore the art of possible, develop certain prototype. Blockchain is a good example of that, figuring out how it works so that we can figure out whether there's a use case to deliver our sort of a mission team and operations team, but also figuring out how might we conduct the oversight of the solution. Especially, a lot of these emerging capabilities don't really have a sort of a manual for us to follow, right? So for example, looking at machine learning algorithm, it's actually quite rare to walk in a scenario where the governance structure is fully laid out, the requirements fully laid out, and the models and code and the data is fully laid out for us to conduct those evaluations. So under that circumstance, how do we actually do our work in a credible way? But also from the mission delivery perspective, Geo recognized not everyone is into reading our 700-page PDF files. So how do we deliver digital focused content delivery to our stakeholders vis-a-vis interactive content, visualized content, and served out in a thin client via web so that they're very accessible to the modern user, to the modern stakeholders. And that is a fundamentally different way for us to publish. Geo report typically takes anywhere between 9 months to 18 months to issue. But in a digital age, that might as well be forever. We're looking at turnaround on some of our ongoing COVID work to see how we can publish new analytical result within every 2-week time frame. So that's a fundamentally different way of thinking. For that to happen, we really need to be able to rely two aspects of cloud. One is how do we leverage the commodity services that the cloud offers so that we can cut down on the cost, whether those are data storage, whether those are security related consideration. But how do we also leverage the leading edge capability of the cloud, like graphic processing unit, like edge processing, so that we have the flexibility to experiment on those leading edge solutions. So I think having a cloud posture allows us for that. And then I'll just add one more thing that was really fundamentally sort of revelatory for GAO is that going to a cloud allowed us an SLA-driven way to deliver results. So for example, right, on an on-prem solution, nobody will guarantee you that your hardware will be up 99.999%. If it's up, it's up. If it's down, it's down, right? But in a cloud environment, those kind of SLAs are codified and they're guaranteed. So that when we let's say have to deploy certain package for Pythons or for R in a virtualized environment, that is a snap of a finger. In a physical environment, you have these on-prem security, governance, version control, load balancing, all those issues to address. So for us, deploying a simple open source package was a multi-month exercise. And that was a sort of a wake-up call for us to say, for us to do advanced analytical work, packages cannot take 3 months to deploy. They need to be instantaneously available to all of our data scientists and statisticians. So it's a learning along the way. I'm very grateful that with TTS's help that we were able to sort of migrate the journey as quickly as we have been, but there's certainly more work to be done as we continue to scale our cloud presence beyond just developing prototype into more of a sort of a data center migration kind of posture.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about the SLAs. I know within TTS, there's a big advocate around having high availabilities, in fact, customer-centric, right? That's what most people come to accept from their commercial services. We should be able to deliver the same, and cloud helps us get there. So we're going to change a bit now, and as we did before, going to take some questions from the attendees. So like before, please type your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. But to kick off, I think it'd be great to hear probably from maybe Venus and Taka. Actually, all of you can jump in on this one. A question we received is, any success to speak of in terms of the use of DevSecOps, more specifically with pipelines from on-prem to the cloud? Would be great for one of you to jump in and speak on that topic specifically. I know I know with USDA, there's been a lot of efforts to sort of move some of those on-prem workloads into the cloud. So mind speaking of that, Phoenix? Oh, I believe you're on mute.
would know that by now, as long as we've been right in this posture. So, listening to Taka talk about it, and Jerry, you said it too, having a CI/CD pipeline really is what is very important, especially when it comes to authorization. When you have DevSecOps and you have that cybersecurity built in, what comes out of that pipeline can be secure, and it should be secure because you built in all of your requirements in the CI/CD, and it allows you just continuously to either modify applications or really generate or create new applications. And that's what we've done in one of our mission areas, is created that CI/CD pipeline just for that reason, so that, as it was our proof of concept initially, so that we can understand making sure that we had all of the cybersecurity requirements baked in, and that as a CISO, my team actually could then do an audit of those requirements and make sure they were met. Things like two-person integrity, making sure that, when the particular tool found a change or deviation in a requirement and it was documented, that the same person that fixed it was not the same person that said it was fixed, right? Two-person integrity. And so all those simple things that you think about in a CI/CD pipeline, and really having a technology stack for your CI/CD pipeline is also going to be key in order to be successful as well. Everything from the orchestration to, from the development where you're going to store the code, all the way to, having, version control. All of those things I think were important for the CI/CD pipeline. So we did that proof of concept, and that was successful for us here at USDA.
And this is Taka. I'll just add to what Venice has articulated. I mean, for us, our focus really is on advanced analytics as well as some of the emerging capability. So a sort of a holistic application of DevSecOps didn't necessarily apply for the innovation lab specifically, but we did take components of that. We have our own CI/CD pipeline. We sort of cobbled together our own version of the Agile framework that works for us. But on top of that, something that we're doing is do a sort of complete retrospective of the cybersecurity hygiene, so relative to advanced analytics, right? Because a lot of identity access management are focused on human being, credential, role, etc. But a lot of time we don't necessarily pay attention to the kind of credential that we give to models and algorithm and RPA robots. Essentially, they can freely roam around our system. And if those solution gets hacked, and a lot of machine learning algorithms are quite susceptible to adversarial attacks. So we have a very concerted retrospective around how do we provision access gained by those models and algorithm. So they're not just sort of blanket root access to everything. So it was on top of CI/CD pipeline. It also gave us an opportunity to really do a sort of clean slate around some of our cybersecurity practices.
And Taka, what you could do as well when you're talking about RPA, what we do, one of the things, and Jerry, I didn't mean to step in front of you, but really tying that bot to a person model. And so that bot has what a typical person would have, but I tie them together from an ICANN perspective, because how do you really do identity proofing on a non-person entity, right? And you have to make sure that the bot is auditable. And so in order to do that, we tied it to an actual person model as well.
Yeah, I think it almost even starts before like your pipeline. Like when we hand over a VPC, we try to make sure a lot of must-haves, to receive a CMS ATO is kind of built into it, like automatic logging, scanning tools, monitoring, all those basic things are going to be delivered as part of that package. And then, we're probably around 150 applications in some stage in our cloud right now, whether they're already live or they're in process. Maybe 70% of them are migrations, right, from legacy data centers. So we kind of learned over time that what is the best way to make this as easy as possible for those legacy customers? And a lot of times it's even, we find ourselves in situations where we'll have to provide like a managed service, right? Where we actually have to do a little bit of the work with them, but we don't want that to continue, right? You don't want that to continue forever. Like in out years, I just have these managed services costs keep going on. It's more about, yep, we'll help you move. But during this process, you're actually going to learn, or we're going to learn so much about your application that we're going to automate a lot of this for you so that we kind of leave you in a position where you can take care of it for yourself. Like those are like the goals that we instilled in the program to achieve.
And so, Jerry, kicking off on that, it's something that we, when we're working with partners, really often find at TTS as well. And so, since this is bringing in a different way of working, and it is really a paradigm shift, how do you impact that with your workforce? Or how does that impact the workforce?
Yeah, so it kind of is a culture difference, right? We started out with one contract and we broke it up into 4. And we did it for good reasons, basically to change behavior and to take advantage of the cloud more, split brokering from the rest of it. But it also creates a little bit of work, right? You have more contractors and a dispersed community to bring together to act as one. So we found that, it is kind of challenging, but it's working quite well. I mean, I think we've seen immediate benefits from that right away. There's accountability on ourselves. Like, we can't expect to hire contractors and to perform in the work if you're not going to heavily participate into that, right? So yes, we do have the agile framework in place. That helps greatly because it ensures communication. Actually, today is a PI planning day for us. So I kind of jumped out of it to join this. I'll jump back in afterwards in the next 2 days of that as well. So we make sure we get together as a program quite often and manage it that way. It's a challenge to sort of make the rest of your stakeholder community aware too, meaning your external customers, the rest of CMS, so there's an upskilling that needs to take place. We've created a maturity model that we try to base everything off of, whether you have awareness or is it competency, or are you engaged? And not all positions across CMS need to be competent or engaged. Awareness, definitely, because I think we should know where everything is being hosted and how we are serving our customers. But and then that's serving us very well and helping us get it out there. So.
And Laura,
Great.
from our perspective, I thought you wanted us all to answer the workforce question. My apologies.
I think in the interest of time, we may have to jump to the sort of next section. So thank you all for your questions. And we're going to launch another quick poll. And this has been a great opportunity to chat through your experience and really helpful to those attending the event. So kicking it off now, what best practice are you interested in incorporating in your agency? Cloud Smart, an innovation lab, some DevSecOps, a streamlined ATO process, or remote workforce development? So if you cannot see the poll, feel free to type your answer into the chat. So it looks like we have streamlined ATO process a little bit leading the others, and we, as folks still add in.
Yeah, I just want to add, the notion of streamlined ATO process, I think that can only happen after you got your first one. I mean, the first one is always the trickiest one, especially, some agency or some organization may think that FedRAMP certified solution in of itself equates to ATO. And oftentimes you sort of find out that's just the beginning of the process. So, streamline ATO, at least for GAO, certainly I think we're having those conversations, but only after we gotten our first one.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of need a precedent. So as we see, just a little bit, that leading, but really sort of a broad interest in the folks from the chat in particular saying, I can't pick just one. And in fact, I think a lot of this list of components to sort of overall broadly successful cloud adoption strategy. And so reflecting on back what we saw in this poll, which should have popped up for you, panelists, one last quick tidbit that you could share with our attendees on the difference that made the difference for your agency's cloud adoption and our infrastructure modernization journey. Let's start with Taka.
Sure. I would just echo the previous comment around having a strategy, and that includes procurement people, that recruits IT folks. There are folks that understand cloud in sort of an academic sense, and there are people that have actually done it. And then there's a vast distinction on that one. And that's one of the reasons we went out to TTS, is really for their actual experience having architected and engineered the solution. And so, a lot of good intention could hit a sort of significant snag when it comes to procurement. So that strategy definitely needs to include acquisition. And if there's a level of education that needs to be done on those conversations sooner rather than later, as opposed to, year end right now.
And Venus.
Well, because we've been in this journey a while, in order to continue on this journey, I think what we've benefited from the most is FedRAMP started a liaison program. And so immediately USDA participates in that, because, the whole mantra is, do once, use many. And with constrained resources and a physical constrained environment, we want to leverage across the enterprise, the federal enterprise, what our partners are doing so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so for me and USDA, I think being a part of that program has allowed us to capture best practices. We've shared best practices. We've used resources, and really having that tight-knit relationship with the FedRAMP PMO has been helpful. And then, of course, training my staff so that now we have that liaison and we can now train across USDA, which goes to the workforce question. How do you build that workforce? Because initially you may have to buy it because you don't have it, but then you start to build it. And it's programs like that that help us build that as well.
And for those of us who are less familiar, FedRAMP is another component within the technology transformation service. And so Jerry, take us home.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. We came up with the strategy a couple years ago, like almost this time 2 years ago, on how can we increase our cloud adoption. And that's sort of when we were deciding to break up the contract into 4, and engage TTS and instill some HCD work into our program. And we started this whole MVP product in AWS West, because it was a region that we already had, but we didn't put a lot of applications there. So it was kind of a greenfield for us. So it's like, let's enter into this extreme modernization effort while we're doing HCD at the same time. And during that time, we thought we'd come up with a marketing campaign on how we could market this once we accomplished a successful MVP. But it actually was not necessary, because we incorporated HCD into the effort. While we were going through our MVP and the HCD team was doing research and everything like that, I think that just organically grew because of customers that they were reaching out to saying, hey, we're doing this. What would you like to see? And so much of that research was done, it actually marketed for us. So we had customers reaching out to us before we even finished the MVP. And by the time we finished, last August, since then, we've doubled the size without really having to do a marketing campaign. So that was just a huge impact on cloud adoption.
Well, with that, I want to thank our panelists, and I'll hand it back to Jessyka to continue our talk today.
Thanks, Laura. That was a very insightful conversation. I really enjoyed that. All right, so next up is an impact talk from Laura Buford. Laura is a technology lead from the Federal Election Commission, here to share how FEC partnered with TTS's 18F to redesign its flagship web platform, FEC.gov. This redesign effort focused on overhauling the FEC website to make information easier and more efficient to find, which included an update of the technological infrastructure. Laura?
Thanks so much, Jessyka, and thank you to Anna Ruth for driving the slides today. We can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about how the Federal Election Commission builds scalable architecture with Cloud.gov. In my talk, I'm going to share the challenge we face of the ever-growing volume of campaign finance data and expanded interest in that data, and how we address that challenge using scalability in the cloud using Cloud.gov. A little bit about me. I'm the technical lead for FEC.gov. I'm an open source contributor. I have 14 years of experience working with campaign finance data. I'm interested in open source and government, and particularly how working in the open can increase transparency. You can also follow me on Twitter. I've tweeted out the slides if you want to get, I guess, the sneak preview of these slides before they're published. I'll get started by talking about the challenge of our data, a little bit about the FEC and campaign finance data, and how it was causing challenges for us in our systems. So a little bit about the FEC and our data. FEC is an independent regulatory agency that was created after reports of financial abuses in the 1972 presidential campaign. FEC is tasked with administering and enforcing campaign finance laws for US House, Senate, presidential and vice presidential candidates, which includes facilitating the public disclosure of all funds raised and spent to influence federal elections. So what does that look like? You can find all of this data on our website, fec.gov. So if you want to see, our regulated community is required to, can you go back one more, please? Thank you. Our regulated community is required to disclose transactional information to us regarding the amounts of contributions and expenditures they have. We have hundreds of millions of these transactions that are searchable and downloadable on our website, and the total volume of this data is about 4 terabytes. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, please. You can also, so you can also see who's running for office. So that was like all the transaction level data. If you're interested in a particular campaign, you can check out our election profile pages, where you could see, for example, who's running for president, how much money they raised and spent, how much cash on hand they have, and then also their most recently filed campaign finance disclosure reports with the FEC. We also have a public API. API is the source of data for fec.gov. What's an API? It's an unhelpful acronym. It just means a code that allows 2 software programs to communicate with each other. So what it means is when you come to fec.gov, you get data through the API, or you can access the API directly to get the data in a programmatic format. We provide data to other government agencies, such as the Library of Congress, the media, and you yourself can come check out FEC data on our API. Just to give you a sense of scope, during high volume periods, we'll see about 1 million requests per day from all over the world. Most of our traffic comes from the US, but we do get traffic, international traffic. So today I'm going to take you back in time a little bit to talk about the growing volume of campaign finance data and how that created some challenges to our technical systems. So when the FEC first started collecting and disclosing campaign finance data, we had a fairly steady growth of transactions. And then as time progressed, we had a massive explosion of growth that really dwarfed that data. And then moving past the 2014 election, we started to see, we're starting to have even more growth of data that was starting to cause a lot of problems for us in our infrastructure. So around this time, we had our legacy system that was being challenged by this massive explosion of data and increased public interest in campaign finance. And what kind of symptoms did that have for us? The infrastructure wasn't easily scalable. Our operational costs totaled over 1.4 million, which for a small agency like us is a lot of money. It took several months to purchase and deploy servers, and it could be difficult to anticipate how much usage we were going to need, how much storage and memory, and our exact expenses were difficult to predict, and we'd often end up overspending on infrastructure. And it was just a lot of time to manage that infrastructure as well. So we realized we wanted to take advantage of cloud technology, and so we ended up rebuilding our website using Cloud.gov. So moving into the next section of my talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about our redesign, how we scale up in Cloud.gov, and some of the other benefits that we see by using Cloud.gov. So the FEC partnered with 18F in 2015 to redesign our website. We wanted to build it open source, we wanted to add the API, and we wanted to build it using best practices for cloud-based technology. And we decided to use Cloud.gov as our platform. So the new FEC.gov runs on Cloud.gov. So what does that mean? So Cloud.gov is a platform as a service. This is differentiated from the traditional on-site applications that we had in our legacy systems where we had to manage everything down to the hardware. When you use a platform as a service, you only need to worry about your application and your data layers. If you're looking at infrastructure as a service, that's where you might see building your own cloud technology using one of your typical cloud providers like Amazon, Microsoft, Google Cloud solutions. So what are some of the advantages of using a platform as a service? Cloud.gov provides identity and access management, which is a hugely important and kind of difficult to get right when you do on your own in the cloud. Operating system and network security. They have an aggregated logging system where you can look at your logs across all of your applications to identify trends, which is super helpful. And I can get into some of those advantages a little bit later in the talk. I want to do a quick technical demo of how we scale up in Cloud.gov. So here I'm running my applications. The third from the top is my API application where I'm running 5 instances or virtual machines. All I have to do is run this command to scale my instances up to 15. And this is real life, this is my demo. It literally is available in seconds. These instances are added to the load balancer and are automatically available. There's no downtime. I just tripled my capacity in Cloud.gov, whereas that would have taken us 3 months to do. I think that took about 3 seconds to do here. So that's horizontal scaling when you're adding what would have been servers in the past that are now virtual machines in Cloud.gov. You also have the option of scaling vertically in Cloud.gov, meaning adding memory to your machines. We manage our memory. This isn't something we usually need to do on demand. So we manage our memory in manifest files, and you can quickly make a change. We keep these in source control. You can quickly push a change to Cloud.gov by updating your manifest files and deploying with the cf push command. Just some other benefits we've found from using Cloud.gov. Cloud.gov runs on top of Amazon Web Services. You have the advantage and stability of the Amazon cloud. However, you don't have to worry about managing billing yourself, which can be hard when you're running your own cloud infrastructure. Cloud.gov is FedRAMP authorized. Our project and your project would have the ability to inherit the Cloud.gov ATO, which vastly reduces the amount of paperwork that your security team will have to go through to get an ATO. Cloud.gov is built on the open source Cloud Foundry project, which has a really strong open source community. It's really fast and easy to deploy, building in that DevOps, DevSecOps culture where it's easy to push up changes. It supports a lot of programming languages and has really great documentation, like a production ready guide will walk you through step-by-step of best practices for building applications in the cloud. So the impact for FEC of moving to Cloud.gov was really huge. By moving to Cloud.gov, we were able to save about $1.2 million per year in infrastructure cost, in addition to saving all that work. Before, where it would take months to purchase and deploy servers, we can now scale up our application instances in seconds. Where the expenses and usage were difficult to predict in the past, pricing with Cloud.gov is fixed and transparent, so we don't have any unpleasant surprises there. And where we used to have to spend more time on maintaining physical infrastructure, we can now spend more time to dedicate to our disclosure mission. So if you'd like to learn more about our project and see this in action, our project is open source. So if you go to fec.gov and scroll down to the bottom, there's a link to our GitHub repository, which is where all of our code is stored. This is our working code base. So if you see changes here, that's our source of truth. If you also want to see what we're working on, we work in the open. So all of our open issues indicate the work that we're doing, and you can follow along there. If you're interested in more open source projects in government, you can check out FEC and others on code.gov. It's a really great way to explore other projects. And that leaves us time for questions.
Thank you, Laura. I've actually really enjoyed working with the FEC team. You all are so great. So thank you for sharing those insights. Now we're going to take some questions from the attendees. Please type your questions in the chat box and we'll get to as many questions as possible. All right, first question. You spoke to the creation of an API. Do you mind telling us more to the security? How does FEC secure its data APIs? And how do you authenticate users and throttle usage?
Oh, great question. Thanks. In 10 minutes, it's hard to talk about all the great tools that we use. We use a service called the API umbrella, which is run through api.data.gov. It's currently a free service offered to government agencies that allows us to set up rate limiting for the API. It is public data and it's a public API, but we do need to protect our resources. So if you go to there's a link to the API documentation in fec.gov, and it's one of the links that I shared. The API documentation, you can sign up for an API key there, and that's how the API umbrella is what enforces those rate limiting settings.
Thank you. Okay, next question. The work currently is incredible. However, can you also tell us what does the future look like for how the FEC delivers campaign finance data to consumers and users?
What does the future look like? So we recently implemented a database service as our database backend for campaign finance using AWS Aurora, which actually has auto scaling capabilities. So we are hoping that that will help us have even more elasticity to respond to requests. We're constantly tuning and improving our queries. You know, as the data grows, there are big challenges with dynamically generated queries and making sure those are run efficiently. And we've got a really great team that works together across the database and the application side to look at slow running queries and how we can get that information back to users as quickly as possible.
The future, right? It's hard to talk about the future, right? I think we have time for this final question. So what has FEC learned on its cloud adoption journey that if you could go back and start again, you would do differently or the same?
Okay. I think that for me, working with Cloud.gov was my first exposure to cloud technology. And I think I underestimated the amount of benefit that we get from it because one of the problems with making things look so easy is it looks like how hard can it really be to implement these types of things yourself. So with some other projects we've tried and we have learned a lot. We've explored implementing our own infrastructure, and I think that's been a lesson learned, is just gaining greater appreciation for how much Cloud.gov manages for us and the amount of risk that reduces. So I think going forward, I'm even more of an the more I learn about infrastructure as a service, the more I'm an advocate for a platform as a service. You know, working with 18F was a really great opportunity for us. And I think one of our biggest challenges was agency handoff. You know, 18F has some of the best engineers. We had to get up to speed on all this new technology. I think handoff took longer than we were expecting, but ultimately, I don't know, I think it's been 2 years now. We've been running the project on our own now quite successfully, but it was a steep learning curve for us, even though we're only managing the application and data layers.
And with the small team that you have, so kudos to your whole team. Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's been great to speak with you today. Thanks for sharing all this information. I'm going to now turn it back over to Eddie Tejeda for some closing thoughts on the event.
Thank you, Jessica. Wow, that was a great little demo there, and a lot of really interesting discussions. I want to thank you all for attending. Thanks to our speakers and panelists, and especially to the organizers who've helped put all of this together. You know, the goal for this event was to share best practices across the federal government, and I think we hit our goal. You know, we heard from a range of experiences, agencies that are just getting started, building innovation labs, the importance of user experience and DevSecOps in planning your cloud strategy. So, you know, as someone who's working in this space, in the cloud and infrastructure space, I find a lot of these challenges very, very fascinating. And hopefully you're able to gain some new perspectives from this event. We hope you're able to take some of these lessons back to your agencies and let us know if you have any questions. We want to continue to learn from you all. We want to continue to have conversations so that we can continue to improve our experiences as well. So we have a couple of resources that we're going to link in the chat. COE just announced their cloud and infrastructure playbook. That's going to be posted on the chat. Cloud.gov also has been running a series on the infrastructure that you can learn more about. FedRAMP has also been working on the video series that you can learn more about what they've been up to recently. And if you're looking to get involved, Digital.gov has, you can find a community of practice there. It's primarily focused on cloud and infrastructure. So you can connect with other folks in the federal government and learn about their experiences. Well, that's all. I think I'll hand this off back to Jessica for some final words and closing us out.
Thanks, Eddie. All right, and thanks everyone for attending, and we hope you found today's event valuable. If you have more questions or would like to connect further, please feel free to contact us at tts-info@gsa.gov. Please take a few minutes to complete our feedback survey. The link is being dropped in the chat, and we will send it out post-event as well. Also, as we mentioned in the beginning, this is the third event in a series of events powered by TTS. We hope that you'll join us and continue to grow with us as the series evolves. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.